What's on the radio, man? We return you to our program, already in progress. All right, welcome back. We're on to our fifth matchup. Do you hear that massive pounding? Oh no, there goes Tokyo. It is the Godzilla of all albums, the fourth album by Led Zeppelin from 1971. Again, 34 days before I was born. That you would have to be living in a cave to not have heard any song from this album. There are a few albums in this world that are omnipresent, and this is absolutely one of them. Taking on this beast is Bruce Springsteen with his Darkness on the Edge of Town album from 1978. After a massive upset in the last round when he knocked out Neil Young, ranked one album ahead of him, the boss is back, and can he raise a cane and take out the original Monsters of Rock? We start with the beast that is the fourth Zeppelin album, and the timer begins now.
Yeah, beast indeed. This is, I think, when most people think Led Zeppelin, if you're whatever Led Zeppelin song pops into your head first, the odds are it came out for this album.
Oh yeah,
because man, there's so much on this album. One note that I had down that I actually, I will admit to stealing off somebody else from the internet. The interesting balance here, because there's sort of two main things that Zeppelin really did well. One is like the heavy, hard, driving rock, and the other is sort of the soft acoustic ballad. And this album actually really balances both of those really well. Sometimes within the same song, like when the levee breaks or Stairway to Heaven, where it starts off with the acoustic and it gets heavier. And so it's sort of like the two biggest things in their wheelhouse they really focused on here.
Yeah, the quote I found, and I'll tell you who said it afterwards, is the phrase heavy metal didn't suit Zeppelin. It didn't suit them because they were so much more than a heavy metal band. Yeah, they had a sound that constantly surprised. They used influences and they took chances that other heavy metal bands just would not conceive of. Maybe sparked by Robert Plant's lyrics. He had that Tolkien-esque majesty about his lyrics, and people don't like that about his writing, but I do. I love the imagery that he uses, and it is the combination of the way Jimmy's acoustic guitar is used and the presence of that blues background. It gives their music much more depth than your average heavy metal band. Geddy Lee.
Oh, Geddy Lee said that.
Geddy Lee said that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
And I think that's really does epitomize this album. Yeah, because people go, yeah, heavy metal. It's like, yeah, but it's not quite.
Metal.
It's not. It's heavy, but it's blues heavy.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, we talked about this I mentioned this last time we were talking about it was either Led Zeppelin 1 or Led Zeppelin 2. I don't remember which one it was, but I made the point that the early stuff, everybody says, oh, well, it's just heavy distortion blues, right? That's all they were doing. No. Even that is an oversimplification. Every time you try to pigeonhole Zeppelin into a category, you're not doing them justice, because they did a lot. Right. It's like the Beatles.
They weasel
they did
out of
so
it.
many different.
Yeah, they'll weasel out. The moment you're like, oh, I can squeeze them into this, or they'll just pop right out. Like, no, they don't fit there, dude. Try somewhere else.
So the Beatles, they weren't just a pop band,
right?
They actually wrote some decent songs.
Yeah,
they did.
Which we'll come back to that a little bit later. But
okay, so Bruce, Darkness on the Edge of Town.
Yeah, apt title. This is the one that I actually mistook the first time I heard it. I mistook it for an early Bruce album because it was so different than something like Born to Run, and in reality, it actually was 2 years after Born to Run. Not some online rando that I was on a message board made the comment. They obviously weren't a Springsteen fan. Bruce Springsteen sucks so bad, even he's depressed. Was the it's a dark album. It's a good album, but it is a dark album.
He sucks so bad they threw him out of that bar.
Not quite as dark as Nebraska, but it's dark.
Right. The 1978 Rolling Stone Review. Springsteen's lyrics are a departure from his early work. Almost its opposite. In fact, dense and compact, not scattershot. And the scenes are the same. The highways, the bars, cars, and toil. They all represent facets of life that rock and roll has often ignored, or what's worse, romanticized. Darkness on the Edge of Town faces everyday life whole, daring to see it something greater can be made of it. This is naive, perhaps, but also courageous. And I think that depicts Bruce Springsteen's, I mean, when we look at Nebraska, Darkness on the Edge of Town, Born to Run, you know, when he's looking at real life and showing, just slapping you with reality, this is it. And he leaves it for the listener to make the judgment, because he doesn't. He's just, he's telling you the story and telling you of these people. It's up to the listener to make the final call.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I'm not sure what more we can say than that. I think that quote from Rolling Stone, the original Rolling Stone review, is just pretty damn good summary right
It
there.
is.
A hoot that he wrote Because the Night and Fire and gave them to other artists.
We mentioned that last time.
Yeah.
But you know what? They didn't fit.
They wouldn't have worked on this.
No.
Fire, you know what? Fire probably could have fit on this album, but definitely not because.
No, they were much more optimistic and positive than the rest of the album.
Yeah, Because the Night is, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, time to vote.
Okay,
Cory, you're up.
I am first. How can I vote again? I mean, it's Zeppelin 4.
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah, no, it's Zeppelin 4,
It is
exactly.
Zeppelin 4.
Yep. Okay. All right.
We're all just like, nope.
Yep.
Fuck you, Bruce. Sorry, you lose.
We have we're on round
6,
and so far we have been unanimous on every single one of these.
Wow.
That old fat man on the radio.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Our next matchup, here it is again, folks. A question of life, the universe, and everything. The Beatles against the Rolling Stones. This time, the Stones come out with their third top-ranked album, Sticky Fingers, from 1971, 233 days before I was born, which beat out David Bowie's album, ranked 52 slots ahead of them in the last round. But the Stones take on the highest-ranked Beatles album, Abbey Road, released in 1969. Now, I have to say, 7 days before I was born. And an album considered the Mount Everest of Beatles albums, because let's face it, this was the last real album for the Fab Four when they were firing on all 4 Liverpudlian cylinders. So we begin with the Stones, and the timer starts now.
I'm not sure what this obsession is relating everything to your. You know what? Oh, I know what it is. You know what? Scott had a birthday show. I had a birthday show. Now you're just jealous at this point.
I'm also making the point that this is how old these albums are. They're all around the time when we were born. We are discussing albums that we couldn't even appreciate and listen to. Well, we might have heard them when we were babies, but you know, these albums are timeless. Is kind of what I'm getting at.
Their longevity has proven that a lot of those songs are iconic these days, and a lot of the sounds. So yeah, of course.
Yeah, and like we've said, there's not a lot of stuff that's come out in the past, like 20 years, 50 years from now, they're still going to be playing.
In the last 20 years, there's nothing like an Abbey Road or a Sticky Fingers. Nothing.
No, but Sticky Fingers, going back to this album, another Rolling Stones phenomenon.
It's a masterpiece, really.
I mean, Brown Sugar, say what we
whatever.
will about the lyrics.
I love that song.
Oh, no, I'm not going to. I love it, too.
It's a good song.
Yeah, no, it's a very well crafted song. Yeah. It's just that the lyrics didn't age well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's all.
So, which again, I think we said last time, even the band acknowledges they've actually stopped playing it live because Mick has said, like, you know, I'm not really sure why I thought that was appropriate at the time, but I would never write that song now.
And in late 71, the Stones were going against all odds with this album. They were overcoming the loss of Brian Jones. They were just dealing with the disastrous press coverage from the Altamont shit show where they hired the Hells Angels for security, and that went fucking sideways. And the deep financial strain that they were just... I'm sure they were getting sued from that. They were, they were trying to evade taxes and everything. So they came out swinging with this one.
Right.
They really did.
Yep. All the when you can convince Andy Warhol to do your album cover,
right?
That alone is pretty much an amazing accomplishment.
You probably got some pull. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love the title, just Sticky Fingers, because it's
Yeah.
That they threw that. All those little references are all over this album.
Well, they are.
Yes.
They are the bad boys of rock and roll. They are sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They really are. When you say sex,
That's
drugs,
true.
rock and roll, it's the Rolling Stones that epitomize that. The first band to really just go, yep, that's who we are.
They were one
to
of
really embrace it.
Yep.
One of the first bands to take apart TVs and stick them to the ceiling and things like that.
Okay, Abbey Road.
Abbey Road. Yeah.
This is a timeless album. I can't. This was something that when we mentioned how old they are and how young we were. This was something my parents had, and I played this album a lot. This was one that I just loved, front to back.
Yeah, and this is. You said they were still at the top of their game. I would actually quibble with that a little bit. I mean, musically, yes, but the band was falling apart. I mean, this was the last. It was not the last album to be released, but this was the last album they recorded.
Right, but they were still at
the
pinnacle of their songwriting and the pinnacle of everything they'd done in the studio, leading up to what we're going to cover later with previous albums that led up to this.
But this is also a lot of these tracks. This is also the beginning of their solo careers.
True.
Because this is not a collaborative album. This is a Paul song followed by a John song, followed by a Ringo song, followed by a George. I mean, they were not meshing well as a band at all by this point.
But I will say this, even though it was a Paul song or a John or a George song, I think they still collectively made it theirs. I still think that some of these songs wouldn't have come out as well as they did if it wasn't for the other members adding giving their input.
True.
That's fair.
That's
fair.
I can agree with that.
As much as I love Here Comes the Sun, that's George's, I have a feeling that there's something that John and Paul added to that gave it that little piece de resistance, that little last thing that just went, wow, that's where this song's just fucking amazing. And that is because none of them have been able to recapture the lightning of this album or any of these songs. Even if you call them their own solo works, that you can't name any of their solo songs that have matched anything they wrote with the Beatles.
Nope, that's totally fair.
Except maybe Imagine.
Well, and actually, we are out of time.
Okay.
So we will actually move on to the voting. And Scott, you are up first.
Oh boy, I'm gonna give it the Stones.
All right, Dave.
Man, this is a hard one, but I just think on the whole, it's Abbey Road. So Cory, it falls to you to decide this.
God damn it! I have like so many pros and cons that I really went through on this, but in the end, it's Abbey Road. It's the Beatles. Like I said, I think this is really well. I really think this is pinnacle as far as everything that. And we're going to come to this later. Everything else that they've done leading up to this point, they learned what worked, what didn't work, and with Abbey Road, they pulled everything that did work.
That was a tough matchup.
Yeah.
It's very tough.
And now, the conclusion to that thing we did in the middle last time. Yeah, you remember.
You show us everything you got. You keep them dancing and the room gets hot. You drive us wild, we'll drive you crazy.
You never know. I mean, I'm just saying, these things could happen.
Well, I mean, there's tons of covers out there of songs.
Sure.
That's a given, but they're not trying to sell themselves as the original act.
Right. If the Ethiopian Youth Choir tried to sell themselves as Kiss, it would be like, that's okay, that's a big pill to swallow. I ain't buying it.
But the makeup is fantastic.
Right. But maybe we had the original makeup artist from Kiss working with the Ethiopian Youth Choir, and that makes them more Kiss than Kiss. Of course.
Okay, so I guess our discussion really is it's music because we've used television, we've used corporations, and they're just not. I guess they're not quite the same.
Yeah, it's because it's an artistic endeavor. So really, I think you need to keep something of the original intent. I mean, come on.
Well, so that's a good segue. Is there some sort of formula at which point it is sort of no longer appropriate to keep using the old name? So you have the situation. I mentioned the Journey situation earlier. You have bands like or acts like the Temptations and the Four Tops. You can still go see to this day those old Motown acts. You can still go see them. Each one of them only has one original member left, but you can still go see them. And then you have the total extreme where there is literally nobody from the original lineup. The one we've talked about in the past was the fake Fleetwood Mac. So Fleetwood Mac went through a bad spell where they broke up, swore off touring, said they were done. Turned out they weren't, but said they were done. And their management deciding that they wanted to keep the money flowing a little bit later, or a little bit longer, excuse me, realized that even though Fleetwood Mac was hugely popular, most of the fans had no idea what they looked like, so he just hired a bunch of musicians to go out and perform as Fleetwood Mac. That seems a little bit much. Yes, you want to go see Yes? Well, you need to pick which one you want, because there's actually 2 bands called Yes that are touring right now, and one of them has no original members left.
Well, there's also the touring hologram of Ronnie James Dio.
Oh, right.
Yeah, there is that.
Can't forget him.
I think they have one of Tupac doing the same thing.
Yes, they do. So there you go. Holograms. Is it the same thing? Fuck no, it's not. Come on. It's a recording.
Okay, and going back, because it's listed here, Pink Floyd.
Right.
You know, Roger Waters left, but there was still 3/4 of the band.
Yeah, 3/4 of the band, one of whom was not an original founder, but had been there since the second studio album forward, so...
And was another prominent songwriter.
So if you take, if it'd be like if, say, Paul McCartney just quit the Beatles mid-stride.
Could the other 3 guys still keep touring as the Beatles?
Yeah. Could they still have done what they did?
Oh,
No.
well, that I think is a different question.
That's
That's
a different conversation for sure.
But could if they had decided? I mean, of course, the Beatles didn't tour for very much after the early '60s.
Right.
But had they suddenly decided to go back out on tour, could the other 3 guys go out and use the Beatles name without McCartney? I don't see why not.
Interesting.
I don't see why not,
I
especially
don't
in that band where they were all sort of ongoing contributors. It wasn't like, I mean, yeah, McCartney was writing a lot of songs. So was John Lennon. So was George Harrison.
You would have had more Harrison works in there for sure. We would have gotten to that greasy codpiece sooner.
And that's another. I think I give you a little bit more leeway as a band if you still, even if you're down to just one guy from the original lineup, if that guy was really the driving force of the band, I think you're still fine.
Like Jeff Lynne.
I think Eddie Van Halen could have replaced everybody but himself, including his own brother, on drums, and still toured under the name Van Halen.
Well, I mean, it was him and his brother, and their last name was fucking Van Halen. So it made sense. Yep. Yeah. You can't have a Van Halen without Eddie Van Halen. Yeah. How does that even work?
Well, you've got Wolfgang now.
Whoopty shit.
Well, what do you? But at this point, you have to give them a little bit of slack because, again, digging up Eddie and standing him up on a stage like Weekend at Bernie's is not going to fly.
Most people aren't going to be into that. True. Dicks!
Your Van Halen tickets all come with a complimentary fly swatter.
I think Scott, you kind of touched on the bottom line here earlier, which is I think this ultimately comes down to how you're presenting.
Yeah.
If the audience knows what they're getting into and they choose to buy those tickets anyway, then they got what they paid for.
Supply and demand.
Right.
And Gene Simmons knows that if he puts it out there and people want to see Kiss, even if it's not them, and they're willing to pay for it,
and that is, when you go back to that quote, I mean, that is what he said. He said it basically, it's a tribute, autobiographical kind of thing. It's not, no deception about it. So,
right, and he's a huge marketer anyway. I mean, he always has been. So, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it. Yeah, there will be a certain segment of people that will buy into that. Will it be good? Probably not, but whatever. Good luck.
Or it could be.
Or it could be great.
They could get phenomenal musicians that they are doing auditions and running them through all sorts of, running the gambit of can you dance with 10-inch heels?
Yeah.
Can you spit fire?
Yeah, you have to be able to do.
Can
all
you
the
be a
stage
complete
shit.
asshole?
Okay, now you got to be.
You could be Gene Simmons,
but you can't have a drug problem. Okay, all right. Say no to
and
drugs, kids.
but that's just it. Actually, that's a really good point. It is the business,
right?
And you would be an employee.
Yes.
You're a rock star. You're a big Kiss rock star, but you probably don't get to live the big rock star life.
But you still collect a paycheck, literally.
You're getting the paycheck, and you're sending the groupies to Gene's house. You don't get them either.
He's like, no, God damn it! All those groupie whores come to me.
Bring
come here, little girl.
Bring Viagra and Ensure at this point.
Bring a bottle of Ensure with you. Oh, goodness me.
All right, I think we've beaten this.
Yep.
Beat it until it's bled a bit.
Once again, I think the bottom line here is Gene says what seems like an asshole thing, but when we pick it apart, he's actually kind of right.
Yeah, if people are willing to pay for it, then who are we to say you're an idiot? Yeah. When, well, again, he's making how much money?
And he's a rich idiot, so that's kind of the point. It's like Kanye. Yep. Kanye is a hugely rich idiot, but he's Yeah.
Gene Simmons is a lot of things, but idiot's not one of them.
No, he's been very smart about the way he has created and marketed that brand over the years.
That. There's something to be said for sobriety in rock and roll.
Yep.
All right, let's we'll take people into round 2 now.
Phase Satan? What?
Phase? What?
Phase Satan. All right.
So our next matchup, it's the Beatles
Complete
again.
with dildos. What? Wait a minute, with bubbles? Yes.
Bubbles?
We do have bubbles coming out of those dildos. It's amazing. Look there, Bob. You can see 12 of them all in a row. And you hear the ducks. You can hear the duck chorus. It's going off right now. There's like, oh my God, where is it? Nowhere. It's a little duck. Dildo.
And people wonder why these things go over an hour.
Sorry. Anyway.
Our next matchup.
Bend over, Bob, because we're bringing it all back home, and it's going to be a hard day's night.
Yes. The Beatles return with their movie debut of A Hard Day's Night in 1964, a low-ranking album that took out Neil Young in the 4th, with a line drive up the middle that ended miraculously with a wobbly field goal, but still came through unanimously. The Beatles take on a younger and more concise Bob Dylan with his album Bringing It All Back Home from 1965, the year that he met the Beatles in New York, as referenced in the first round of the show, and was quickly becoming the fan favorite and inspiration to other musicians of the time. We will kick this off with the Beatles first, since we've just been talking about them, and the timer begins now.
Well, now talk about a Beatles album I really liked. I preferred this over Abbey Road, I'll be honest.
Really?
Why?
Why? God damn it.
Well, if you're going to make a statement like that, I'd like you to back it up.
Well, yeah, that's what she said.
Yeah. back that shit up.
Back it up, boy.
There are some...
You still haven't explained why.
I
Yeah.
have not. Nor am I going to.
Okay, you just prefer...
Well, I mean, you don't really have to, because they're not up against one another, at least not
But it
yet,
has
so.
been a hard day's night, so, against Dylan.
I mean, this is one of those, I've said it before, this is early Beatles. This is one of the first handful of albums that came out, and this is not the Beatles that everybody raves about for the most part, because the innovation had not really started here so much. This was, I mean, it was good. There's a lot of great songs in this album, but they're not materially different from what an awful lot of like R&B based pop music was at the time.
Right.
She loves you, yeah.
Anytime at All is great. Can't Buy Me Love.
Right.
And I Love Her. Yeah, these are all really...
Those are classic Beatles, man.
They are. They are classic Beatles.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not taking that away. It's when people rave about the Beatles, this usually is not what they're talking about.
No, but there's a lot of songs that you will still hear on the radio from this album.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm not taking that. Again, the songs are solid.
I guess that's more my point.
There are numerous number one songs on this album. Yes, I will say that. But when you're going, but when you're competing with what the Ballad of the Green Berets, that may not have been this one, but
I think it actually was this one that what Cory's referring to. If you missed the last time we talked about this, the number one song. Or maybe it was, it was when Meet the Beatles came out. The number one song in America at the time was Ballad of the Green Berets, which just gives you a sense of how weird the music environment was at
desperate
that time.
we were for music in America.
Yes. We were so desperate we were listening to that and thinking it was good.
It doesn't have to be the greatest Beatles album in the world to compete against that.
And yet, it was here all along. It just took the Stones and the Beatles to reintroduce us to our own damn music.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The other thing about this album is there is quite a bit of filler on it, which even they acknowledged. I mean, that Cory mentioned this was written for the film. They got this idea to do a movie. They got asked to write 7 or 8 songs for the movie. They did that. And then, kind of like we talked about with Zeppelin and Physical Graffiti, where they had 3 sides and they had physical media and they had to fill up a 4th side, somebody said, these are great songs, but you don't have a whole album here. And so they had to go back in the studio and write a bunch of songs just so the album would have a 2nd side.
Yep. Okay, Dylan, bringing it all back home. Subterranean Homesickness Blues.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mr. Tambourine Man.
Yeah, yet that's a song that, maybe he didn't make famous, but other people did, because it's
The Birds in particular.
It's a damn good song.
Yeah.
True.
And Cory, you just mentioned Subterranean Homesick Blues. A lot of people will look at that and say this was really, in some ways, this was the first rap single because it's mainly just this rapid talking blues where he's going off forever.
I don't think, how many other people have pulled this same kind of bit, especially with the little poster signs? I mean, NXS did it with Need You Tonight. The second half of that song, Mediate, Into the World as We Know It. I think even with the signs, the middle of Can't Get There From Here, in their video.
If you don't know what we're talking about, if you don't know what we're talking about, go onto YouTube and search for Subterranean Homesick Blues. And it was a film that Dylan made where he's standing there with sort of pieces of poster board with all the various lyrics as the vocal is happening over. The other thing is, this is really Dylan Goes Electric. This is Dylan saying, look, I know you guys fell in love with me for being a protest singer, but I don't want to be pigeonholed. I want to do other stuff. And so he picked up an electric guitar, and a lot of people hated him for it because they felt like this sort of great savior had abandoned them. But this was Dylan saying, F you, this is my career, and I'm going to make the music I want to make.
And there's a lot of other musicians out there that will point back to this era of Dylan that inspired them.
Yep.
True.
Absolutely.
From this year.
With their dicks out.
I think we good?
I think we're good.
With our dicks
I think
out.
we're good.
Okay.
And I think that we can move on to voting. And I think
Dave,
I'm
you're
actually up
first.
And I am. I'm up first. And I think that, again, it's not peak Beatles. Whereas this is a really, really solid Dylan album. So I got to go with Bob here.
Yep. Scott?
God damn it. Yeah, I'm going to go with Bob, too. Mainly because, it is a better album. I mean, it's
against
just
your
not-
favorite Beatles album?
Whatever. Everybody's like, he doesn't listen to the Beatles. No, I don't. Okay, fuck you. You don't like it? Come on the show. Tell me why. Twat. Jesus.
At M_shenanigans.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I vote
Praise
last.
Satan.
And yes, Bob Dylan.
Yeah, so fuck you, Beatles.
No, this one I just kind of knew that. Yeah, it had to be.
We'll just take old Hard Day's Night there out back and shoot it. You got to put it down, Timmy. You got to put the dog down. That's all it is. Son, go make me a julep now. Go muddle me something. And now for commercials that no one asked for. Mamaloney has a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R. Mamaloney has a second name. It's M-A-Y-E-R. Oh, I love to eat it every day. And if you ask me why, I say, 'cause Oscar Mayer has a way with B-O-L-O-G-N-A. Yes, oh yes it does. You just make it sound so nasty, baby.
So we got a doozy to close out the show with here. Some of these rounds are easy, right? Sometimes you get Kanye versus Sgt. Pepper's.
Oh, no.
And
It's
some days you
Kanye
get-
versus blank. Blank wins.
Yeah, well, that is also true. And some days you get this, and as luck would have it, oh man, do we have a matchup for you? Cory, you just go ahead and say.
All right, our final matchup. And here we are at the end of round 2, nearing the end. This is the end of season 2 for Musical Shenanigans. And as it happens...
And the end of the wild card.
Yes, the end of the wild cards. And as it happens, we have saved the hardest round
Praise
ever
Satan.
for last.
What the fuck was that?
What was that?
He shocked himself.
No.
You leaned right in. No, you leaned right into the mic on that praise Satan, and there was like a weird electronic feedback.
I heard
thing.
that. That's because I praised Satan. So. Sorry.
Satan says he's had enough today. Let him rest.
Fine. Jesus Christ.
As it happens, we have saved...
Oh, yes. Praise Krishna.
As it happens, we have saved the hardest round ever for last. It is 2 Beatles albums taking on one another. We knew that the Stones versus the Beatles was going to have to be addressed, but we didn't figure that now it would have to be the Beatles having to beat themselves. So in one corner stands Sgt. Pepper's, released in 1967, ranked at 24, facing off against the eponymous double album simply known as the White Album, released in 1968, ranked at 29. These albums are 1 year, 5 months, and 27 days apart. These are what you might call the Beatle Irish twins. All right, gents, it's time to take on Sophie's Choice. And the time starts now with Sgt. Pepper's.
Sgt. Pepper's.
Lonely Hearts Club Band.
You know what, Scott, you saved me from having to put in the music in the background.
I know, but I like to fuck with it.
So, we talked earlier on Rubber Soul. You had the musical innovation, you had the studio innovation. They didn't come to both of those quite at the same time. Boy, did they put them both together here. Because here you've got musically, they are all over the map.
Oh, yeah.
You've got classical influences. You've got like old 40s standards, old music house or old opera house tunes. This is one of the most sprawling, innovative things that I think they've ever done, that frankly I think anybody's ever done. Just absolutely amazing. And this was one of the first ones too where they kind of said, look, if you're in a rock band, this is 1967. This is still fairly early in terms of like the rock era. If you're in a rock band, you don't have to be confined to just making rock music, right? We just talked about Dylan going electric. This is like, if you like it, write a song in that genre.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a rock tune. You can do whatever. You can be a marching band if you want to be a marching band.
Damn straight.
How many other... I think about a lot of the prog. You think about like Yes,
Right.
or someone like ELO, and how they could all come back to Sgt. Pepper's of going, oh, look, we can do this.
Yeah.
We can combine classical with rock. We could do so much with so many other sounds and incorporate it in. You're right, Dave. We don't have to be pigeonholed to just bring in the drums, the guitar, and the bass, and that's it. We're not going to have anything else.
So I remember an early conversation between the two of you guys, actually, which I actually don't even think it was on this podcast. I think it was on the Quarantine Radio predecessor to this podcast, which long story, which I won't go into, but for those of you who know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Cory and Scott recorded something a while ago, a couple of years ago, actually, and I remember Scott making the point, genres are bullshit. Like, you don't have to, everybody feels compelled to lock themselves into a genre, and you just don't have to. This was really the first time you had a major, biggest, not just major, frankly, biggest act in the world at the time, making that statement. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself.
Right. And glad they did, because they influenced a lot of people.
They did.
Yeah. Also, just the production quality. I think we've talked about this before. The production quality here is amazing. You have one of the first real experiments with sort of quad, what we would today refer to as surround sound. There was actually one review I read online that said, thanks to its cinematic 360-degree sound design, it was the closest you could get in 1967 to strapping on a VR headset.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty apt analogy.
It is, because there was everything.
But then you have the White Album.
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
At this one, I think we could make the exact same comments about this album that we did just about Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah,
as far as the
pretty
innovation and all of the sounds and everything in it, I think they took what they did very well in Sgt. Pepper's and brought it into the White Album.
Agreed.
Now, where Sgt. Pepper's, I think, I'm not going to say better, but I'm just going to say that they did it in one album and they locked it all in, and it perfectly worked. Everything just flowed together. Whereas this one being the double album, there's just some moments where, yeah, it kind of falls off, but they did keep the experimentation of going, let's try something different. You know, you're playing like the old saloon song with Rocky Raccoon and just all these different sounds and all. So I think it's kind of like a Sgt. Pepper's Part 2.
It feels that way because there's a lot of fluff on both albums. Okay, maybe not a lot, but there is fluff on.
You're not wrong.
albums.
There is fluff on both of these.
Yeah, and there's things that ostensibly could be left off, maybe, but didn't get left off, like Revolution Number 9, shit like that.
Right.
It's just like, okay, so, but which album really has more growth though? That's, I think, that what this might.
So
come back to.
I mean, speaking of and kind of building on the don't get pigeonholed into a genre, speaking of growth on the White Album, there's an argument that the White Album was really the first precursor to heavy metal, because especially when you had Helter Skelter and Birthday, and you had that heavy driving guitar coming in. McCartney actually was quoted later in an interview saying that they were really trying to top The Who. Here's the quote. Pete Townsend said, "I Can See for Miles was the dirtiest, filthiest record ever, so we were trying to out-filth The Who." So
okay.
not only do you have on the White Album this experimentation with different genres, you actually have an argument that now they've moved on to inventing whole genres.
Yeah.
There's that. Yeah. I mean, this is not something anyone had heard prior to this.
All right, we're not only we're out of time, I let us go a little bit along because that's a tough one.
All right.
So it's time to vote. Scott.
I'm going to give this to the White Album because as much as I do love Sgt. Pepper's, I think the White Album was a little more progressive, and to me it's just more listenable. There's a lot of songs I go back to from there as opposed to songs from Pepper.
Okay.
Cory.
I'm also going to go with the White Album.
Oh, thank God I don't have to decide this.
I feared, man, when I rolled this, I was like, oh, good, I'm not last.
Yeah, that was...
and good, too, because honestly, I would have gone with Sgt. Pepper's, I think, on the whole.
Wow.
And Scott, for this, actually the exact same reason you said, like, both super good albums. Personally, I would rather sit down and listen to Sgt. Pepper's.
There you go. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Both of these albums are both like they're fucking excellent. So really, the little negativity that is on each, it's a matter of like, did you put too much salt in it?
Yeah, it's reaching. I mean, both these albums. I mean, back to front and back to front, respectively. I will listen to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our rounds for today, and brings us to the end of our wild card round.
Yes,
as I said at the opening, we started the wild card round with 64 albums. As of right now, we have gotten it down to 16.
Yes.
So here are your 16 wild card albums. All right, we have back to the beginning here. David Bowie, Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Led Zeppelin 1, Back in Black by AC/DC, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, Houses of the Holy, also by Zeppelin, Springsteen's Nebraska, Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, The Beatles' Rubber Soul, Hunky Dory by David Bowie. We also have as of today, Physical Graffiti from Led Zeppelin, The Rolling Stones' Some Girls, Led Zeppelin 4, Abbey Road, Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan, and as of just our last round, the White Album by the Beatles. So those are your 16 wildcard albums. So what happens now? Well, now we are going to go back to that original bracket of 128 albums that we talked about. You will not be hearing us talk about these albums again for a while. Right now on the original bracket, we are halfway through the original 128. We're going to get the 128 down to 64, to 32, and then to 16. And then when we get to 16... we will take those 16 finalists, match them up against these 16 finalists, and we see where we go from there.
Exactly.
It's sore, but you gotta slam. You gotta slam that dick in the door. Yeah.
Now he's written a song about it. Okay.
You know it.
All right. So this is the end of season 2. This seemed like the perfect place to do this.
All right. We're all like, fuck y'all. Thank you for listening.
So we will begin season 3 with 4 brand new albums. We will be taking on using this format of all 3 of us voting. Not one person voting, not one of us having to do the defense.
You will no longer get my exciting stories.
That's positive and negative.
and you won't necessarily hear us limiting ourselves to 5 minutes like we did today,
right?
Because when we come back, we will be talking about all new albums that you've never heard us talk about before. So we'll go a little bit longer.
It's like putting a sock on your junk.
Yeah. And at this point, we're probably over-explaining it because you guys don't care.
Exactly. By this time, you've turned this shit off. But anyways,
they're like, oh my God, who's still listening? Just tell us you're still listening on M_shenanigans.
It's like that post credits of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You're still here.
You're still here.
Go home. It's over. Go.
Okay, so the next 4 albums we will be discussing in the first round. It will be the band X with their album Los
nice.
Angeles,
Nice.
taking on Tommy from The Who.
Oh, God. I have to listen to that fucking thing again. Jesus.
In the next round, it will be Lord with
Yay.
Melodrama
All right.
taking on Oasis with Definitely Maybe.
Oh, God. I have to listen to them again? Oh, man.
So,
Fuck, I hate Oasis.
Scott, no pre-vote. We
Scott,
do not have
Scott,
early
you're-
voting.
You're ruining the suspense
Yeah.
here, Scott.
They're cunts, though. It's not my fault.
We do not. Musical Shenanigans does not support early voting. That's not true.
It's fixed. It's rigged. It's all rigged.
Now. Yeah, you sounded like an asthmatic duck.
Well, actually, so maybe it's better than I thought.
Well, there you go.
All right, that's it. So push the button, Frank.
Somebody said, punch? What? He wants to be punched in his anus. I punched them in their anuses.
Actually,
yeah.
it's push the
I punched
button,
them
Max.
in their anuses on the night of
yes,
the
now.
first full moon.
And
when
this
my
is where
dick
I faded
exploded
out.
and I-
Adios, folks.
Whatever.
Bye.
Fuck that. No. I got more to say about punching your anus. Yeah, I got more to say, but you're never gonna hear it now.